Dearest gentle readers, we are trying to figure out what's going on. Hey, I'm back as promised to chit chat about Bridgerton season 3. I watched season 3 part 2 with my friends last night, like marathon style. And that was an emotional roller coaster in so many ways. So I think what I want to do is talk generally about each of the character arcs and how I felt about them. And then talk about the general arcs on the season if they don't fit into what I'm going to say about each character. I want to talk about script doctor, like changes that I think might have been good to make this season a little bit more impactful and a little less chaotic feeling. And then I want to speculate about what's next. So yeah, I have a lot of love in my little heart for Bridgerton, and there were some really high highs in season 3 for sure. But yeah, ultimately the end of the season left me and my friends just a little cold. And I fear we might have lost the plot a little bit, especially like given that we have 2 years to wait for new TV. I don't know that this was as strong of a send-off as it could have been. You know, I feel like past seasons have had me like, oh my God, I need to know what happens next. And while that is true, of course, I'm interested in what happens next. I'm invested in the characters, but I don't feel that the ending of this season necessarily set up a direction that I'm pumped about. By the way, the things that are making me question the direction of the show have nothing to do with the diversity of the show. I'm, in fact, very, very, very pumped about the diversity on the show. But there are other things plot-wise that I am curious how they're going to be handled and not especially confident about at this point. But I'm still willing to hear it out. We'll see if I feel the same way in 2026. There are going to be spoilers for all seasons of the TV show and probably a little bit the books, even though I have not read them. So yeah, okay, let's get into it. Alrighty, so obviously the main character is Miss Penelope Bridgerton, née Featherington. And we love Penelope. Nicola Coughla is such an amazing actor. She's stunning in this role. She is so wonderful as this character. And I just wish that Penelope's motivations were a little bit clearer in the back part of the show, because early on, it's like, obviously she wants to get together with Colin. And then at the end of part 1, she does get together with Colin, which is great. But then once the bounty on Whistledown's head is out and Cressida claims Whistledown status, which was wild. Like the girlies and I were shook to our very cores for sure. But it just wasn't clear to me why Penelope wanted so badly to keep being Lady Whistledown. Like at a certain point, she literally said, there's nothing I want more in this world than to be with you, Colin. And it wasn't super clear. And I saw a TikTok, maybe I'll find the link to this TikTok, where this person was saying that in the book, Pen is a true spinster. She's been out for like 10 seasons. She does not see any prospects. Whistledown is the only option she has. And so in that scenario, it makes sense why she wouldn't want to give it up and why she feels that it is a true inherent part of her identity. But in this version, it just felt like when Cressida came out, Penelope could have just let her have the title. Protecting the Bridgerton's name felt like a good enough reason to put out one new thing, but I still think that the way that she clung to the Whistledown identity just didn't really make sense. And I'll come back to this Whistledown thing, because I think that the external conflict of who is Lady Whistledown, everybody's trying to figure it out, was really high stakes and exciting. But in the second part of the season, it ended up taking a lot of time and energy away from Colin and Pen's relationship, which is what I really wanted to see. Speaking of Colin Bridgerton is a sweet angel. I was riding the emotional roller coaster. I was up and down with Colin on season 3, because early on, he's kind of in his rake era. And my understanding from the books, which I have not read, is that all of the Bridgerton love interests have some flavor of rakishness to them. That seems to just be the trope that Julia Quinn lives with. But I did appreciate that that he's putting on a show. I did not love how part of his putting on this show was going to brothels that often. And I know after talking to some friends who are a little bit more period drama, period romance savvy, I know that brothel scenes are just kind of par for the course. I would consider myself very romance genre savvy in general, but the specifics of the period are not what I'm familiar with. And so for me, those scenes stressed me out. Even if they'd happened last season, it's like when I am laser focused on this character's love story, it just bums me out to see like any kind of infidelity because I am so profoundly monogamy pilled, you know? But I know that that's like the period. So I'm not saying that he's a bad person or that anyone in those scenes is a bad person. Infidelity just doesn't really fit into my personal romantic fantasy preferences. But Colin quickly came back around once his simp genes were activated after kissing Pen. Oh, and I do remember when Pen was reading his journal, it's very clear that he's like, all of this intimacy with all these women is so meaningless. So that makes me feel a little bit better, and just the idea that this is what is expected of people within the story, within the time period, within the genre. But knowing that Colin is ultimately a lover boy at heart is very sweet and lovely. And yeah, once his simp genes were activated, I was like, okay, let's proceed. And in the back half of the season, Colin continued to be a lover boy and make good points. He was rightly upset about Whistledown, like the Whistledown reveal made it extra challenging for Colin, is that he'd already had this experience with Marina, right? Where he trusted someone and they betrayed him. So I completely understood why he reacted the way he did. Like he values honesty above everything else. He's been hurt before by deception. And so I felt like, especially in the latter part of the season, once we were out of brothel land, I was pretty much on board with Colin. I thought that maybe the wedding, since they were like, we're going to proceed with the wedding, even though we're upset, I think that somehow that did feel different than Simon and Daphne's wedding in season 1. Like the chaotic, unhappy wedding moment still felt sweeter. And then as they were dealing with the Whistledown fallout, he was still there for her. Colin, in standing up for Penelope mode, was very, very dreamy. We do support. And yeah, their love scenes were very, very lovely. And he just seems like a really stand-up guy. Like almost every scene I was like, at minimum, he's making points. At maximum, he is stealing hearts. So yay, Colin. And I adore Colin and Pen together. I saw some other discourse that was like, why does she like him so much? We saw him fall in love with her, but we didn't see her fall in love with him. I don't really care about that as a romance genre girly. Friends to lovers, just it makes sense to me. I would not have minded some flashbacks because that would have been cute, but ultimately I don't need that to care about the relationship. My general thought about the relationship is that I wish there was more of it, which I think a lot of other people will agree with. In the latter half of the season, it felt like Colin and Pen's relationship really took a back seat, even though they are obviously main characters in the season and doing important things to further the plot. Their relationship didn't feel as important as I wanted it to, despite having like many nice moments. Episode 5, episode 6, they were strong, and then like 7 and 8 is where they kind of felt fizzly. A little going in circles. It's like, are we pro Whistledown? Are we against Whistledown? What's going on? Why is this still up in the air? But again, the actors, wonderful. The characters themselves, wonderful. I feel like all of my gripes are really just the writing and not totally understanding where it's going, what the goals of it were. Okay, now for everybody else, I'll go through the siblings alphabetically and then I'll deal with the rest. So Anthony and Kate, so cute. Kate is being really wonderful, big sister vibes, so they're adorable. Again, pulling in the discourse now that I'm not avoiding spoilers. Kate having the baby in India is kind of a chaotic idea for me as a person who understands how hard it is to travel in the Regency times, but maybe that's another thing that we just kind of have to hand wave in Bridgerton world and assume that there will be like good healthcare and easy travels for a pregnant woman in 1815. Sure. Yeah, Obviously I want that for her. So slay. And yeah, she gives wonderful advice. Anthony is really cute. He feels, I don't know if it's out of character or just that like being in love has changed his personality so much, but he's just kind of adorable and feels really impulsive and high energy. And Jonathan Bailey is so charming, so dreamy. So we love Canthony. Benedict had a lot to do in the back half of the season as well, hanging with, as I call her, scary mommy, Tilly, and what's his name? Paul. And yes, my friends and I were goofing off and we're like, we saw you from across the bar and we really liked your vibe, is the energy of Benedict X Tilly X Paul. I guess maybe it's like 2024 New York, everyone's poly brain. But the second she was like, I want you to meet my friend, I was like, I see where this is going. But yeah, I guess if you are in 1815, maybe that sort of thing does not immediately occur to you. And yeah, I think it is good and smart and interesting in general for Bridgerton to say gay rights. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Benedict would be a queer man in this world, especially given like everything we've seen of him up until now. And I guess the thing that I have questions about for Benedict, because like I love this for him, I love this development for his character, but the question that I have is that at the end of the season, when Tilly said that she wanted more, it felt like Benedict had kind of renewed his commitment to being for the streets. Like he was saying, you've opened my mind, I don't want to close it. And so it really makes me wonder where we're going to go from here in terms of him ending up with someone in a way that feels really truthful, that will apparently line up with the books. I know the general sketch of what happens in the books, but unless they decide to go like way out there and be like, actually, non-monogamy is also a sanctioned part of Bridgerton life or something. I mean, maybe they will, who knows anymore. But based on what he said, it'll be interesting to see how we land on a season driving, sense-making love story. The Bridgerton boys do tend to have like personality transplants when they fall in love. So maybe that's what we're setting up. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that he should sow his wild oats, but they may have painted themselves into a corner in terms of making whatever happens when the real bae shows up feel realistic and true to that character. Yeah, okay, that's B. C. Daphne and Simon are nowhere to be seen, so I have nothing to say about them. Eloise. Sweet Eloise. What do I think about Eloise? I adore Eloise as well. I adore Claudia Jessie. Like, Claudia Jessie has been slaying this press tour. She's such a wonderful actor. She's so great as Eloise. I also love the character. I know there's a lot of, I don't like this character. I think Penelope is bad. I think Eloise is bad. I actually think that all of the characters have pretty clear motivations throughout. It's your prerogative to like or dislike a character, but I don't feel like anyone mostly is acting in a completely illogical way or like this is just a straight up evil person way mostly. So yeah, Eloise is really just going through it with Cressida and her feelings about reconciling with Penelope, feeling really hurt by Pen this season. And I do love that. And I think Claudia plays it beautifully. I wouldn't have minded if she and Penelope reconciled sooner. And I also think in the charade scene, which my friends and I were like, dear God, maybe it wouldn't be fun to live in Bridgerton times if all you had to do was read riddles to each other. But that was a fun scene though. That was a fun scene because you think Cressida's piecing it together when really she is piecing together that she should claim Whistledown status. Anyway, in that scene when she's like, you must tell him by the stroke of midnight, and Pen is straight up having a panic attack about it, like standing in front of Colin saying, I must tell you something. And Eloise is like, time to go. It's like, girl, give her a minute. But I think that is relatively consistent with the Eloise we know. So, okay. But again, like Benedict, Eloise is a character that you really, really extremely wonder, how are we going to tell a satisfying love story that feels true to this person? Perhaps now that we know that queer relationships are on the table, even more on that later, that actually may be the answer. It's like Eloise really is for the girls and we'll find a girl to fall in love with. My chaotic thought about Eloise is maybe Cressida has not totally left the scene because there was just, I don't know, there was maybe a vibe. I didn't think the vibe would go anywhere, but now I think maybe that vibe could go somewhere. More on that later. What else? I think that's all I have to say about Eloise right now, but I love her. I love them all. E.F. Francesca. Oh my gosh. Sweet Francesca. Francesca and Earl of Kilmartin are really, really sweet, but I could tell like the whole season, it does feel like Violet is, if not the moral compass, like the romantic compass of the show. So it did feel like, okay, if Violet's not buying into this, then something must be wrong. And that sort of bummed me out because I knew a little bit about Francesca's story from the books, which is, I'll just say it, spoiler, her husband dies and then she falls in love with his brother after that. So I knew that was going to happen, but I thought maybe it would be a situation in which she experiences true love, like really true love, twice. But Violet not buying into it made me question that. And at the wedding, after she kisses John Sterling, there was just a little face where she was like, I didn't like that as much as I thought I would, which was funny because she was very forward throughout the season in terms of going up to John Sterling. You know, she was very demonstrative towards him. So I was surprised that she would then not feel anything, or that she would reveal something in that moment at the wedding, because they did seem like a good match, or the idea of like a quiet, comforting love is definitely interesting and meaningful in life and in this show. But I guess to me, this feels like Violet's instincts are right after all. So maybe Violet is just kind of like the all-knowing mommy. And then of course, when we meet Michaela, not Michael Sterling, whoa, that was when my friends and I were like, okay, so we're doing this. And just like the parallel of Violet setting up that when she met Edmund, she was tongue-tied, and then having a tongue-tied moment again with Marcus, and then Francesca getting tongue-tied when she meets Michaela, I was like, oh, here we go. So like, I think even if I didn't know what was going to happen in the books in terms of falling in love with John's sibling, I think probably maybe I would have picked up that like something is happening here. So this is very exciting. Francesca is also for the girls. We love, we support. My biggest thought or question about Francesca's arc is just this idea that like maybe it would have been nice to see true love actually happening twice in her life, which does not seem to be the way the show works. So that's what I feel about Francesca, but I love her. And Hannah Dodd is stunning, such a wonderful actor. And the John Sterling actor is also really sweet and lovely. It did feel very momentous for Francesca to, you know, ask for the Queen's blessing herself. And yeah, as a fellow pianoforte enjoyer, I love this character. Just, it's a sweet little family and I love them. And then of course, Gregory and Hyacinth are two cute kiddos. It seems like the fandom notices that like Hyacinth almost always knows what's going on before anybody else. So she's like, oh, Anthony, what do you think about Kate, the sister? Or like, oh, Colin, are you going to talk to Penelope today? She seems like she's always on top of things, which is very fun. I don't know if they are trying to actually set up something with Gregory and or Hyacinth and the Mondrich kids. That could potentially be interesting. Maybe book people will know. If you know and it's a book thing, don't tell me, or like hide it in a spoiler or something. Yeah? Okay. The other big family worth mentioning are the Featheringtons. Philippa and Prudence are serving comic relief this season, having babies, variously ignoring and enjoying their husbands. They were fun and they ended up throwing a banger ball, so good for them. Lady Portia was the most interesting non-Penelope Featherington to me this season. Portia's plot, which kind of felt like it came and went, was this solicitor inspecting her to understand where her money came from Jack's scheme last season, which I high-key forgot about. And maybe I need to rewatch, but the embezzlement scheme, that's the reason why she is pushing Prudence and Philippa to reproduce ASAP so that there's a male relative who can take the Featherington title. But also, apparently, if the solicitor finds out, the title may be taken away anyway. So yeah, I just really did not remember what she was doing last season. Like, I know she's always scheming, but I think if they had sprinkled in a couple more reminders, that might have helped me remember that was happening. But as it was, when the solicitor reappeared, it felt just a little bit like, oh, wait, right, this is happening. Although it did raise the stakes. So yeah, it did kind of feel like occasionally things were happening more for stakes reasons than for like actually making sense or like telling a good story reasons this season, especially at the end. Anyway, Portia's relationship with Penelope was really interesting as well. She's always kind of a hater towards Pen. And then like the second that Colin shows her any interest, she's like, what did you do? Which is so rude. All the non-violent moms in this show are rude. But then, yeah, when Colin stood up for Penelope in front of her mother, that was really dreamy and wonderful and felt like something that he needed to do. I think part of his journey is standing up for Penelope, especially after he denied her last season to his goofy friends. Standing up for Penelope, which he did continue to do throughout, even when he was mad at her or confused by her or whatever, was a very dreamy and admirable quality in him. So slay. It was kind of wild that one conversation with Colin sort of changed everything about Portia. I might have to rewatch to see if I think that was like a really, really genuine change in her, or if she was just like, oh dang, I better play nice with the Bridgertons. And then like, I think by the end actually came to understand Penelope better. Portia did also get one of the best lines of the season, which was, women don't have dreams, they have husbands. Like, a bar. My friends and I were shook by that line. Sort of an interesting one considering where the show seems like it's going to progress to. I do think that the show wants to add feminism or options for women to its main concerns, to its main themes. So that's interesting. And I do think you get to understand Portia better over the course of this season, which is good. And the actress, again, is wonderful. All the actors are wonderful. I have no gripes with any of the actors. I love them all. Let's see. Okay, then I think the next people that we have to discuss are the Cowpers, Cressida Mom and Cressida Dad. Cressida Cowper, y'all, what a time. Like truly a wild ride with Cressida this season. And I just feel like I don't completely understand why it went like this, because I think she could have very easily just remained mean girl through and through, like with no complication, and then basically done everything that she did without all of the extra humanizing material. If only because you get all of this humanizing info and then it just feels like none of it actually matters. It raises the stakes to some degree, but it doesn't feel consistent to the character. Or at least, if I'm thinking about the genre, if I'm thinking about like how this kind of story is often told, I don't totally understand why we spent so much time building sympathy for this character only for it to not matter. Because in the end, she was doing her best, like trying to make a life for herself by extorting the equivalent of $1 million from Penelope, which apparently she had, or at least she had $500,000, right? But yeah, extorting all of this money. Like you understand why she did it, but even if her motivation was just like, I'm a bad person and I want money, that would feel like a little bit more narratively satisfying than like, we've made you feel bad for this person, but actually she is just evil. So yeah, I think that's what I mean about the Cressida arc. Her coming out as Whistledown was thrilling. It was so twisty turny. I wanted to faint like Penelope when she did that, because that was wild. Although again, I was like, Pen, here is this person ready to take the fall for you. Just let her be done. You could be free. But that's not how any of this works. And that's not really the theme of the piece. Something else about Cressida is that she did put in the work. She did ultimately hustle to figure out who Lady Whistledown is. As did Colin. Those dark poor person streets were all drama all the time. But yeah, Cressida, she did the work. She figured it out. And I saw a tweet that I thought was so funny and correct, which was like, they could have figured out who Whistledown was years ago if any of them talked to any poor person. And Cressida, she did it. She put in the work. That is literally all anybody had to do. So in that very small way, Cressida deserves one flower. But apparently she's still evil. I'm so confused by that character. But yeah, Cressida was such a fascinating person this season. And I feel like her chemistry with Eloise was really, really beautiful. So I'm like, maybe now that we are like well and truly parting from the books, maybe Creloise is in the cards. The little I know about Eloise's book is that she has a love story that revolves around writing letters, and maybe her buddy Cressida could be sending her letters from Wales. Just an idea, because it just feels like, why would we put so much energy into that character for her to just be like, JK, I'm evil and I'm getting sent away anyway. I also thought, or I wondered if Pen, when she was enacting her end of season plan, I thought maybe Pen would give her some money and help her run away. But again, admittedly, Cressida seems to just be a hater who has been through a lot and almost married off to a yucky old man. But yeah, the extorting literally $1 million/millions of dollars of it all, that was confusing. I felt bad for her. I felt bad when people were like, you're not smart enough to be Whistledown. I felt bad when she was getting almost married off to that yucky old man. I felt bad when she was like trying to get with Debling. Oh yeah, that was another thing I thought would happen. I thought there'd be like some kind of payoff with Debling, because he was another character that you get to know really well and feel really sympathetic towards and interested in their life and interested in their future. And then Debling truly disappears. Like nobody even thinks about him even a little bit. I do think Cressida x Debling, if Creloise is not on the table, Cressida x Debling would have been a really good option, because Cressida was totally down to just peace out entirely and just like be a wife and flirt with the widowers. So like maybe explorer, gone for 3 years, probably going to die in the Northwest Passage husband could have been a good match for her. But alas, I guess Penelope did kind of ruin that for her. But surely the show could have figured that out. If not Creloise, maybe Crebling. Something else about Cressida is that she did put in the work. She did ultimately hustle to figure out who Lady Whistledown is. As did Colin. Those dark poor person streets were all drama all the time. But yeah, Cressida, she figured it out. And I saw a tweet that I thought was so funny and correct, which is like, they could have figured out who Whistledown was years ago if any of them talked to any poor person. And Cressida, she did it. She put in the work. That is literally all anybody had to do. So in that very small way, Cressida deserves one flower, but apparently she's still evil. I'm so confused by that character. Cressida's family sucks. Also, that they really bummed me out. I didn't like them either. Again, it's like, you have put in all this energy to make me sympathize for this character and then turn her evil and then send her away anyway. It's just like, where is the payoff for any of this? Perhaps in a future season. I don't know. Cressida is a great big question mark for me. To chit chat a little bit more about Debling, what a fascinating character. But I think that there's a lot of discourse about why Penn should have chosen him. But I'm like, where's your sense of romance? That's not what this is. That's not what this is about. It's about love. It's about fantasy. Y'all, she does not want to be alone for 3 years / possibly straight up widowed because the Northwest Passage is a deadly journey. She wants to be with family, with love, feeling accepted and embraced. And that's Colin. And also, I was talking about this with my friends and they made the very wonderful point that people are saying like, oh, Debling is a practical match. And you're like, oh, marrying a Bridgerton, one of the wealthiest, most favored families in the entire town, isn't also practical. And the bonus is that you actually like this guy, your childhood friend who knows you super well and has a title and has money and has a great reputation. Like, there are actually no downsides to Colin. He is equally practical, if that is the thing that you think is tipping the scales in Debling's favor. So yeah, and they actually have things in common where she and Debling really didn't. I like Debling and I am rooting for him and I do want him to be happy, I guess, even though I don't think he would really be that good of a husband, at least not for Penn. I was shocked when Debling just straight up disappeared and was never spoken of or heard from again. But I guess maybe he got on his boat and he's already off to look at birds or something. Okay, let's see. Who else is around? Oh, okay. So I've got the Mondriches in my long list of characters. And unfortunately, I felt like the Mondriches plot was kind of nothing this season. I think they are gorgeous and wonderful actors and everything, but basically every time we cut to them, I was like, I don't care about this, which is it's a disservice to the actors, to the characters. Based on where the story ended up going, what I think they wanted to do with those characters was kind of set up this parallel. You have the club, and the club is like that thing that you've worked so hard for that is now in the current situation holding you back. And that feels like a parallel to Whistledown, where again, it's like something that you've put all of this energy and all of this time into, but now is it really serving you in this new chapter of your life? How do you reconcile that old thing that meant a lot to you with this new life that also means a lot, needs a lot from you? So I think that is like a super interesting parallel. I just think maybe it didn't actually need to be stretched out over the whole season. Maybe it could have been just part 1, just part 2, or even like an episode in which Penelope is really wrestling with the idea of to continue Whistledown or not to continue it as they are doing that. Throwing the ball was really lovely, but I thought maybe there would be even more of a payoff thematically, because it's like, even if we don't have the club, we can still throw balls, we can still entertain and create spaces for people to build community. Something that I think could have been even more explicit was like, we can build spaces for community, not just for men. Like, hey, my wife is a huge asset in this goal as well. And we can bring together community in an even bigger, more inclusive way. You know, I still see it, I still get it, but I wouldn't have minded if they had like really, really driven that point home more concisely. Someone else who I love very much is Lady Danbury. I adore Lady Danbury. She's a baddie. And Marcus and his little flirtation ship that is almost certainly going to turn into something for real with Violet. But I have to say, like, Danbury being so upset at her brother for mystery reasons. And then it comes out that he didn't let her run away before her wedding. And then it comes out that he was 10. And it's like, girl, I know her marriage was horrible, but a literal child, like asking a literal baby child why they didn't stand up for you is wild. But they talked it out and she seems foolish, but whatever. And so now he has free reign to pursue Violet, which is exciting. Famously, Violet's garden is blooming. And so let's get the gardener in there to tend to that garden. The queen is queening. She's fighting Whistledown. She's trying to make matches. She's kind of flopping at both. But she did ultimately, I'll give her like one little flower too, which is like she recognized that Whistledown comes out to protect the Bridgertons. And she was right. And ultimately she was even more right than she thought, because it was like someone who loves the Bridgertons and ultimately did become a Bridgerton. So we love the queen. The queen was queening. Her costumes were costuming. The wigs were wigging. She's a stunner. She kept those stakes way up high with the bounty on Lady Whistledown's head. Exciting. In general, I felt like the stakes, especially in the last couple of episodes, were like sky high. Very twisty, very stakesy, but I do feel like there's a difference between high stakes drama and really satisfying storytelling. So that's kind of what I want to get to now. I feel like pretty much all of part 1, I was locked in. Thematically, I think it made a lot of sense. Colin and Penelope finally getting together was so satisfying. And I think that, like, of course they had to get together early on so that the Whistledown thing could tear them apart again. But I did just kind of feel like their relationship was in limbo for so long that I was confused. Like at the wedding, I was like, wait, how does he feel? Like when he sees her on the street the night before the wedding and he kisses her, I was like, wait, okay, what? He's mad, but he does still love her. Okay. And then they get married and the wedding is like weird vibes, but then they also dance at the wedding. And I just felt like I never really got a satisfying reconciliation from them. Even as he's like, I will go talk to Cressida and see if I can help. Kind of accidentally ended up making it worse. Whoops. But their relationship didn't actually feel like it was on solid ground. And in general, I just felt like suddenly all this other Whistledown stuff was happening and their relationship took a back seat. And that's just like not what I am hoping for from this show, you know? So I think something that might have made their reconciliation and everything feel more complete and more satisfying would have been a proper hashing it out reconciliation scene. They had the conversation, but it didn't end in a really satisfying way. And I think because it's Bridgerton and because it's romance, part of that conversation and hashing it out would probably have to end in a proper love scene for that story to really feel complete. I think like the way that this show works, you know, we always love to talk about like sex scenes are like extraneous, but I feel like in Bridgerton, they really aren't. And this part of the season, like season 3, part 2 is like a perfect example of how that kind of storytelling would have made me, the viewer, feel so much more secure and understanding of where their relationship stands. Like to see Colin like sleeping on the couch for what looked like weeks and weeks, I was like, this is not what we're here for. Like even after like they dance at the wedding, but then he's like, I'm still gonna sleep on the couch. Like where are we going with this? You know, a sexy reconciliation so that they could face the big bad together. That's what I dream of. Another way to think about this is like, again, another Twitter person, because I'm addicted to Twitter, a romance commentator person said, I'll dig up the tweet, there's internal conflicts and external conflicts. So like things that are happening between the couple and then things that are happening outside of them. And either of those can be a compelling cause of drama between a couple. But I think for Colin and Pen, all the like, who is Lady Whistledown, everybody running around, external conflict was thrown in before they had resolved the internal conflict also over Whistledown's identity. It's all about Whistledown's identity, but I wanted it to be resolved internally and then they could face the external factors together. That's what I think. Maybe the writers kind of mistook the idea that like, we'll just solve all the Whistledown stuff all at once. But I just don't think that that's as satisfying of a way to tell the story. Again, especially in this world where the story lives and dies on the main love story. I wanted like a big, dramatic, quotable love confession scene. And I know they had babies, like Pen had a boy baby and like good for her and everything. Like Pen is winning the most. But if I were gonna get a flash forward, I still wanted it to be about the love story, not about babies. Babies are fine, but like love story. That's what we're here for. So yeah, I think that's sort of my general feel about the season. Misplaced energy. A lot less so in part 1. Part 1 felt pretty focused, but then part 2 felt like it wanted to do a lot of things, and the heart and soul of the story, which is the romance, kind of fell by the wayside. Something else that was kind of wild, and I know that this is close to what happens in the book. At the end of the season, they're being extorted by Cressida. The queen is breathing down their neck. More and more and more people are learning that Penelope is Whistledown. But in the very end, what Pen ends up doing is helping her family throw a ball. By doing so, it makes it look like the Featheringtons have money, so no one will suspect them for doing the embezzlement in season 2. So she like protects her family, comes clean to the queen, and then comes clean to everyone in person at the ball. And apparently in the book, Colin defends her to everyone at the ball, which admittedly would have been dreamy, but I do think part of Penelope's journey is standing up for herself and taking her place in the spotlight and taking responsibility too for her actions. So it did feel, my friend says, it's wild that the queen wasn't madder at her. And it is also wild that the Ton wasn't madder at her. And I agree. The queen has spent multiple seasons trying to figure out who Whistledown is. And then once she figures out, she's like, oh, okay, I just love gossip. And that seems to be what everybody else does too. They're all just like, we all love gossip, rather than being like upset about the things that Pen did. Even the moment when Pen is like, I can use Whistledown for good, when she and Cressida are putting out opposing Whistledowns, it's like, can you? It didn't quite hit. It didn't quite make sense. And yeah, and my friend also said, which was, I think, correct, her speech at the end of the season was giving Katie Heron breaking the plastic tiara at homecoming. Of course, I want Pen to have her moment in the sun, but the plastic tiara vibes just weren't that convincing. And again, that's writing. It's not a performance thing. Nicola is a star and she can do no wrong. I just thought the ending was kind of cornball. And something that my buds and I said was like, actually, it might have been interesting for only the queen to know, or like only a select few people to know, so that she can continue to do Whistledown, continue to make money from it, whatever. Something else that they tried to do that again was a little bit confusing was the idea that like, okay, yes, Whistledown is part of her identity. I think it was Eloise. It was like, you don't need Whistledown anymore. You have a husband. Or Colin was like, you don't need it anymore. You have me. And I didn't understand why Pen was clinging to it so much. And I think that the show maybe could have done a better job of making me care about why she wanted to keep doing it, because as it was, we were just like, okay, it's gossip. And Pen, she's like, it's my power. It's my power. Like, sure, it's fun and it's a source of income, but now you don't really need the income. So why are you clinging to it? Even as Colin is like starting to write his memoirs and Pen offers to edit, he says he wants to do it on his own. I think that like the optics of like man gains confidence in his writing and woman stops forever is a bad look. So I understand why you'd want to avoid that look. Something I did like was Colin rereading the letters and thinking that really all of this is Penelope. Penelope's writing is an inherent part of her and he accepts that, is really lovely. But I just think like, especially after ratcheting up the stakes so high, to want to continue after that feels wild. And for her to come out as Whistledown and everybody just be like, oh, okay, feels so wild and just didn't really make sense in the moment of the show. So I think my script doctor perspective on it is like, let's keep the Mondrich thing within one episode where we really nail the parallel between Whistledown and the club, because I do think that's a strong idea. And then I think I would include actually more Benedict stuff in the earlier parts. We maybe could have done with like one or two fewer just Benedict and Tilly scenes, like maybe get Paul in there sooner, start that journey sooner, less time humanizing Cressida unless there's going to be some payback later. It feels like maybe the point of Cressida's storyline was how few options women have in this time, but for that to play out on that character who then proceeds to like screw everybody over and still not get what she wants, it just feels confusing within this season. The season doesn't feel like complete. And that would allow more time and energy in the second half of the season for proper like Polin love story vibes. You belong with me. So real. They were so real for that. I enjoy that Bridgerton is an ensemble show. I love ensemble storytelling. I love ensemble shows. But I think when you set up a romance at the center of your ensemble show, you really have to make sure that the romance is romancing, or else everything else falls apart. I care so much about the central couples in Bridgerton. And if I don't feel like I'm getting enough of the central couples, it's kind of distracting me from all of the other, admittedly still very interesting stuff that's going on. Whistledown is also just kind of an integral part of the show. And so what might have made more sense would be for her to reconcile with Colin, come clean to the queen, and then it's still kind of a secret to everybody else. Thematically, I understand why we want her to like take up space, own her power, but it just didn't quite work, you know? It just didn't quite land right. I hope you know what I mean. My friends and I just feel like there was a lot of energy and time spent on building up characters at the expense of the main couple. It's not necessarily upsetting me and my girls, but me and my girls are wondering where we go from here. And we are not totally confident that the Bridgerton production team will be able to land the plane, but obviously we remain hopeful. That choice makes me fear that in future seasons we'll have even more extraneous stuff and even less of the main couple. That's the reason that we were excited to watch these shows. So thinking about like what's coming up next, we're not sure who the next season is going to be about. And like the press tour hasn't really given us any clues. Maybe it's Benedict, but as I said, it's a little bit confusing for me to see a path forward for Benedict. Similarly, it feels a little confusing to see a path forward for Eloise at this point. Maybe next season will be Francesca. We spent a lot of time with her this season and we like her a lot, and we did actually meet her potential love interest, so maybe it's Francesca. And what my friends and I were saying is that maybe for future seasons, they could double up on love stories. They absolutely have the time, especially now that like Whistledown is out. So maybe we can really go back to basics and focus on the love stories that we are excited about, especially because we're introducing these queer storylines that are beyond dalliances and actually going to be meaningful and endgame couples, which is amazing. Then comes the question of like, how is the queen going to deal with that? And I think the answer to pretty much everything is like, the queen is just going to decide that it's okay and then it will be okay. So, okay, great. But of course, the how is still going to be fun. It's still going to be dramatic. I'm pumped about the queer storylines, and it's something that I've kind of thought to myself this whole time is like, I have loved the color blind / color conscious approach, because there are so many times that I watch a period piece and I'm just like, what a bummer. Historical accuracy can really be so limiting. So I think like Bridgerton has been a fantasy for people of color. So why not make it also an inclusive, beautiful fantasy for queer people and people of other backgrounds? I love this. I assume that the answer to everything will be queer relationships are legally recognized and people will get married, and also women can have titles, and that will solve everything in Bridgerton land, I guess, via the queen. Francesca's season being next would maybe make the most sense, just because she is the person who feels most on a clear path forward. And yeah, maybe if we double up, that might be good, especially if we're waiting 2 years in between seasons. I think that it's a lot to expect viewers to hang on for 8 full seasons, 2 years apart. Like, are we really going to be looking at season 8 in 2036? That's kind of a wild thing to bank on. Like, are we even going to all be here in 2036, or is everything going to be underwater, you know? Of course, I don't know all of the details of production at this scale. And, you know, they've got thousands of unique costumes, and film is not easy. They took 8 months to film this season, but like, I wouldn't be mad at an extra re-wearing a dress, or even a main actor re-wearing a dress, if it wasn't like at a pivotal moment. The fashion this season, the hair and the makeup and the fashion were all kind of bonkers in mostly fun ways. Like, I'm not a purist. It's a fantasy, but I do think that like, I don't necessarily need completely different outfits for every single person, every single scene for the fantasy to be satisfying. I'd rather have more show ultimately. Or even if they do something like, maybe this doesn't make sense. I'm sure it doesn't actually make sense, but like write 2 seasons and film them back to back so that they can release them somewhat more quickly. Somehow get into a flow that is not a wait 2 years and you'll only have one love story that takes up a smaller and smaller fraction of the screen time. But yeah, I enjoyed the highs and lows of this season. I enjoy Colin and Pen. Really, I just feel like the show has to remember that its true north is the love stories. And I do not care about the gender of the characters in those love stories. I just care that they are really, really given the space to breathe and grow and feel complete and satisfying for me as a viewer. So yeah. Happy Pride, y'all. Gay rights in Bridgerton. Let's go. Okay. Hi again. I recorded the last part of this video on Friday, but much has transpired since then in Bridgerton land that I feel like I have to include quickly here. So it seems like I am not the only person to have a lot of feelings about the end of the 3rd season, but I'm seeing people who are having problems with certain characters, such as especially definitely Michael Sterling being turned into a woman. There are like petitions circulating because people are having a lot of feelings. And one of the petitions is is like, bring back Michael Sterling. But to that I say, as a non-book reader, I don't really have a connection to that character regardless, but I do think that it's really important to bear in mind how queer people and similarly people of color have spent years and years and years identifying with and loving the stories of straight white couples. So surely the fandom could extend the same empathy and care and interest for this upcoming woman-loving woman couple, right? I think that's a fair expectation. And if you are not feeling open to that, then I encourage you to do some soul searching. But the other thing, I was talking to friends about like, here's what I felt was missing from this season and wondering like, are some of these scenes that we really want on the cutting room floor? And the answer seems to be yes. There's a couple of tweets going around discussing some screener episodes that had completely different scenes, specifically Colin and Penelope scenes in the latter half of the season that would have served to explain where their relationship stood. And it just feels really wild to me that they would leave those out. Some of them were romantic scenes. And given that that's what Bridgerton is known for, it feels really wild to leave that out. And it makes me wonder what the rationale for that would be. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think that those romantic scenes really do serve to tell us a lot about the relationships between these characters. I also feel like these deleted scenes are really important for story reasons, for sure, but they are also important, I think, for the actors and for representation reasons. These actors were really, really brave and vulnerable in doing these romantic scenes. And for those to end up on the cutting room floor, I would probably feel like, then why did I do all of that? And the representation of seeing Penelope as a bigger woman being loved and adored was, again, it was amazing to see Colin stand up for her in public and defend her and go to bat for her. But to also see her be desired and adored in an intimate way is also really important. And I think these scenes would have really, really driven that home. So I am bummed to hear about this. And like, I might end up signing a release the director's cut petition because it really did feel like something was missing at the end of the season. And to know that it exists and like these thoughts were had, I'm just filled with questions about why they didn't successfully land this plane, We'll see if this is the end of the story for Bridgerton season 3. I say release the Snyder cut, release the director's cut, because we deserve, and there are things that are missing from this story. It didn't feel complete because it was not allowed to be complete for whatever reason. So yeah, I don't know. If we get the Snyder cut, maybe I'll come back and yap some more. Okay, back to previous me. If you liked this yapping analysis, feel free to subscribe. I talk about a lot of different things at this point. I talk about acting, general creative careers. I yap about different forms of art. Some of them are video games, some of them are movies, some of them are TV shows, some of them are books. But yes, I am always overthinking everything, overanalyzing everything. And yeah, let me know your thoughts below. Maybe like mark spoilers for the books because I have not read the books and I don't know if I'm going to get around to it, but I want to have a conversation. Are you thinking the same things? Did I miss anything that like would have made everything make sense? Or did I miss something that didn't make sense? What are we all going to watch next? Let me know. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like this, give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a comment, and I will be back next week with something else. Lately, I've been feeling kind of inspired around one of my other interests, which is K-pop. So maybe there'll be something about that soon. Keep an eyeball out. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Yours truly, Zena Ellis, now and forever. Okay, bye.